Welcome to Brandon Hall Group's HCMx Radio, the only podcast in the HCM arena that weaves current market research, HR technology, and industry leaders into each episode. Our HCMx Radio host is our Chief Operating Officer and Principal HCM Analyst, Rachel Cook.
Hi, I'm Rachel Cook. I'm the CEO of Brandon Hall Group and the host of our HCMx Radio podcast. Thank you for joining us today. And I'd like to warmly welcome our guest, Liz Pavese. She is a PhD and Senior Behavioral Scientist from CoachHub. Hi, Liz. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Rachel.
It's great to have you. And also with us is Claude Werder, our SVP of HCM Research. Hi, Claude. How are you doing?
Hi. Hey, everyone. Great to be here.
And today we are kind of continuing the discussion from your recent webinar that you both collaborated on. The topic of the webinar was focused on leadership development during times of uncertainty. And is that not a relevant topic to talk about, if any?
Absolutely.
So before we begin, we have some, I think there's a lot of good discussion that you two had and we want to continue along that line of thought. But I'd also like our listeners to get to know Liz a little bit better. Liz, could you share a little bit more about your background and also a little bit about your organization?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Rachel, you mentioned, I work for a company called CoachHub, and our kind of vision and sort of mission at CoachHub is to really democratize coaching, really be able to bring one of the most powerful learning and development interventions to more people at scale in a much more seamless and integrated fashion. So my role at CoachHub is in the behavioral science team, and our team really is responsible for working with our customers to really align their priorities, their talent development priorities with coaching, and how do we kind of help them get the most out of their coaching programs as they leverage a digital platform to deliver this type of intervention. And we also are, really focused on how do we continue to advance the research and science around the impact of coaching, and particularly digital coaching, as that is kind of the next sort of generation of how we're approaching a lot of e-learning is through digitization. So I get to do a lot of fun things, and it's been a really amazing, sort of a ride to be a part of a very kind of cutting edge, I think, place in the space of talent development today.
Great, and that's kind of feeds into, or thank you for offering that context to what you're doing at CoachHub. And so to continue in that line of thought, we hear a lot about modernizing coaching, and you mentioned digitization of it. Can you expand on that thought?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's, I think, a misconception when we talk about digital coaching. A lot of times people will think about, am I talking to an artificial intelligent bot? And that's not at all what we mean. What we mean is almost what we're doing here. We're on, GoToMeeting or Zoom platform or a Google Hangout. It's really the video sort of aspect of it. So digital coaching is really just taking that maybe traditional face-to-face coaching experience and delivering it through, a video conferencing platform, for example, but also complemented with sort of other e-learning that is important for the growth and development of individuals. And so when we think about, what that could do for the growth of individuals, we can take what used to be an intervention that might have been reserved for only a certain number of people in an organization because of the cost and because of the operational lift it would take to support that, and now do it in a much more scalable, more efficient manner and get it to more people.
And Claudia, you've seen that in our research too, that coaching is very effective and powerful, but it's not always attainable or accessible to everyone.
Coaching is super important. Performance coaching is important, but coaching leaders is really important. And the problem that organizations struggle is either not having enough coaches internally, not being able to train the coaches not having enough time. And so being able to have a digital resource where you can reach out to qualified, certified coaches and scale and democratize the coaching for the leaders. Incredibly important and a big part of the movement to modernize leadership development, make it more personal, more experiential, so that leaders are really learning at a micro level and not just getting classroom learning and then being expected to lead. So it's really important, and I think digital coaching is going to be one of those things that really explodes over the next couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. And Liz, can you talk a little bit about the effectiveness of it and what you're seeing as far as we've talked a little bit about the digitizing it, but how does that, what does that look like?
Yeah, so the emerging research around the impact of digital coaching it's emerging. So it's in its infancy. But really, when we look at research that's been done in the last probably 15 years or so around coaching itself, we have a ton of research evidence that shows how it impacts so many individual outcomes, like increase in self-efficacy, learning new behaviors, changes in mindset and greater awareness, to team in outcomes. So even with one individual being coached within a team context, there will be benefits to the team itself in terms of improved relationships. And then there's also organizational benefits, right? So there's greater employee engagement that comes as a result of coaching, greater retention and intentions to stay. Often you'll see greater internal mobility and better talent development as you look at some of the other talent planning and infrastructure that you have in place. And so we have a whole body of research that shows the impact of coaching, maybe not in the digital world, but we do have some also emerging research that shows that there really are no substantial or statistically significant differences in coaching that's delivered face-to-face versus coaching that's delivered digitally or virtually or in a blended format. So we do have some initial evidence that's showing that there is a similar effect and impact, which is pretty incredible, because then we can really take advantage of a much more accessible way of growing our people.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. And so can you also talk about some of the pitfalls in setting up a digital coaching program? And what should organizations be mindful of?
Yeah, I think, and would also love to hear sort of Claude's perspective on this, because I think it's similar to other transformations with other e-learning as well. So a few of the things that are really important to sort of consider is the change management that goes into any talent development initiative. But certainly with adopting more technologically based solutions to things that haven't been delivered in that way before. There's a lot more, I think, that goes into your change management and communication approach than maybe previously. There's the other pitfalls of like just the good old technical issues that come up, right? And what's the experience that the learner or the employee is going through when they're trying to whether it's attend a learning and training online to develop skills and gain knowledge, or if it's through a coaching exchange, almost like this. Technology happens, and so that can be a disruptor. And so making sure, and a lot of companies don't necessarily have the technological infrastructure in place to really support increased learning, e-learning in that regard. those are a couple I think that are big and top of mind. There's a few others I can think of, and love to hear, Claude, some other things that you're seeing and hearing from customers as well.
Yes, I mean, I think there are a few pitfalls along the lines that you mentioned, but one of the reasons that I think digital coaching is becoming more popular and more people are talking about it is some of those pitfalls that you're mentioning are really washing away with the heightened use of virtual and digital learning due to what's been going on in the last year and a half. So the types of video platforms and communication platforms and collaboration platforms that really our research is showing almost 80 to 90% of organizations are using at one level or another, is making digital coaching a lot more mainstream than it was even 18 months ago. So while there are still some technology issues to work out here and there, depending on the size of the organization and their level of sophistication with technology, I think it's less and less of an issue. And the other thing that I think is going to drive digital coaching is, again, just going back to the leadership development, is organizations are finally getting, after years of researching this and asking the same questions year after year about how they train leaders, they're finally getting it that classroom leadership development doesn't work, that it has to be more personalized, that they have to do coaching and mentoring and scenario-based learning. And so between the technology becoming mainstream and the fact that organizations really believe now that they've got to do it differently in order to have any impact, I think there really aren't that many barriers to making this work going forward.
I bet too, over time, we're going to see probably a mix of what individuals prefer, whether it is, more in a virtual type of format or in person. For some, it might be more comfortable being in your own environment and, having, that kind of comfort level, in kind of going through some of, perhaps different issues or different, types of developments. So it'll be interesting because I think it'll be mixed, because same like with development, some people love to still be in a classroom face to face with someone, and some would be happy if they never saw that that environment ever again. So we're always going to have a mix. And I think that's what's so nice and about all these different ways of delivering, whether it's coaching or training, on a variety of different topics, is having the ability to meet people where they are.
Well, I talked to a leader just a few days ago, last week, who had been coached by an external coach in person and now digitally during the pandemic, and really prefers the flexibility of the digital coaching, and found the relationship actually to grow. There was just a little bit more intimacy that she felt, and also much more flexibility in terms of scheduling. And she can, if she wants, she can do a coaching session while she's driving. She can do it at home. She can do it after hours if the coach is willing. So I think there's just a lot of flexibility that's going to drive the popularity of this over time.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, similar to what we're doing today, you were in 3 different locations. Liz, you're like across the country as far as we can get away from each other in the U.S. We're on opposite corners. So, and same with Claude, you're not too far from me, but I still feel like we're kind of sitting together as if we were in the same room. So I don't feel that we're losing so much of that. Now, if we started having bandwidth issues and technology glitches, then, then that's not always helpful, but it's something that's inevitable. And even if, let's say, we are meeting together in person, you still have other nuances. It could be traffic trying to get from one meeting to another. So there's always going to be something that you have to take into consideration that might get in the way of, a seamless delivery or collaboration. So no matter what it is. But moving on to another question I have is around the connotation, well, coaching has typically been considered something you do when a leader has an issue or they need help. You know, do you still see this the case, and do you see that coaching is also helping leaders that are that do perform well, and if so, how is it helping them?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's you articulated it, I think, really nicely, Rachel. There's an evolution in how coaching has been applied in organizations. So historically, if you think like probably around the 1980s, coaching was really almost primarily used as that remediation, performance correction type of solution, which has changed then dramatically over the last 30 years. It's went from that remediation perspective to more of a proactive talent development perspective, where it's focused on giving high performers those opportunities to continue to grow and build on their strengths, to look at core talent and really think about where's their potential and how do we cultivate their skills and capabilities for the future. What about early career and rising stars? And how do we think about really building that pipeline from the ground up for future leaders and movement in any role, right? Not even necessarily sort of a kind of traditional career ladder type of perspective. And so what I would say is that coaching is actually better, almost more suited for kind of stronger performers, high performers, because you're really trying to build on their strengths. And a lot of coaching is really focused on that, building from strengths, having very future-focused goal orientation. There are other practices and processes for thinking about performance remediation and correction, right? When there's a real performance issue. There is this sort of space within coaching that is around performance coaching that does make sense, and it has its time and space. Performance coaching tends to be very focused on developing specific skills at a very point in time, and it's very time bound. You see this a lot in like sales coaching and sales transformation coaching and some other applications. So I think it's important to sort of make those distinctions. And really, I love that we've moved away from that remediation perspective and really have leveraged this intervention as a proactive talent development solution.
Yeah, I think the proactive part is what's most exciting. I talked to an organization a couple of weeks ago where they had just taken a great performer who was a project manager in the organization and made the decision to promote this person to the head of the department. And so she was going to jump 2 or 3 levels up. And so they assigned an external coach and an external mentor to proactively kind of prepare her for the path ahead, because she was going to have a steep learning curve. And so, you know, that's the opposite of that bad connotation. You're actually preparing someone for change, and they use digital tools to do the coaching, and it really they felt was really making a difference in making this person, you know, ready for the promotion and being able to hit the ground running through the personalized coaching that she was able to get.
That's a good example. And you know what else I'm seeing too? You know, it's interesting the points you made from the evolution of where coaching has come, you know, particularly around 1980s to now. You know what else I'm seeing is that, you know, those that are looking to excel or looking to advance in their career, they're actually going and seeking coaches. So it's something that it's not always being assigned to them, but those that are looking for opportunities to advance, they're not waiting. You know, they're asking, you know, what are the resources available? What kind of coaches do you have? And if it's not even in their organization, they may be seeking that kind of support externally. So I think it's a competitive advantage for organizations to, you know, to have a plan to offer some level of this to, those that not only want it, but are seeking it.
I think that's a great point, right? I think with that shift and people seeing that, oh, this is a good thing that I can benefit from, it is becoming a bigger ask from individuals. And to exactly your point, it's going to behoove companies to really be able to have the kind of solution at scale to support that, because they maybe have not had that influx of an ask previously.
And now with making it digital, you have even a greater ability to offer, different types of coaching. So, it's not just for the athlete, it's for the corporate athlete now. And, so, and there's, I think it's great how it's evolving.
I know an organization I talked to a few weeks ago that it actually, the management team is actually requiring all their top managers to have coaches because they're dealing in this very volatile environment and everybody's working virtually, and they want everybody to have a coach. So they're being proactive from the management standpoint, not being waiting for people to ask, but saying, you're going to have a coach, you need a coach in order to be successful. So I think that's a great thing.
Well, I think also, what's expected from leaders today versus 20, 30 years ago, it's different. Leadership styles are different. It's not just about being able to delegate and to be able to lead. As a leader, you also have to be a coach, you have to be a mentor, you have to be an influencer, you have to be able to communicate, you have to have business acumen. I mean, the list goes on and on and on, and you still have to do your job and be responsible for whatever line of business that you're leading and whatever line of business that is expected from from the organization as far as revenue or, unless whatever kind of leader that might be. But he also, there's a lot around mental health and being able to be well balanced. So there's, I think an increased pressure, but also a better balance for what is expected from leaders. But with that, it has to be continuous. You have to have that continuous ability to coach and to also bring in all the new technology and new expectations economically and what's going on around the world to how you bring it into the business.
And coaching is really effective for all of those, what you're describing, Rachel, their capabilities and competencies. They're not necessarily hard technical skills. And coaching is very effective in helping to develop capabilities and competencies, which are what is going to be even more important with an ever-changing environment. How do I flex? What's the resiliency is something that we need to build up in all of us, especially our leaders. And then how do you coach your team to be more resilient, right? Cognitive agility, problem solving, in the complex ways in the complex world that we're operating in, those are the things that are going to matter more. And so coaching and mentoring and those kinds of learning and development interventions are going to be more powerful in helping to inculcate those capabilities within an individual, but within the team and the organization at large.
And talking about, coaches and leaders, what are some of your key considerations for matching a leader with a coach in a digital environment?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is about, you have to start with the end in mind and be really clear on what are the goals and what's the purpose of the coaching engagement for that particular individual. How does that really tie into some of your strategic objectives, your talent priorities, and then certainly, that's kind of like the framing and the scope of the why behind your offering the coaching in the first place for those leaders. So I think that's an important starting point. And then when it comes to the individual person, there's actually not a lot of like hard and fast sort of science around what really makes a difference in the one-to-one match between a coach and a coachee, except for the fact that we know that the bond and the relationship between the coach and the coachee is one of the most significant predictors of ultimate success and impact coming out of that coaching engagement. And so it's important to think of for a coachee, an employee or a leader, to feel comfortable with who that person is, to feel like it's a safe and shared space, that they can bring any topic to that conversation. And then really the motivation and commitment on the part of the leader. Right? Do I really want it? That's the next sort of biggest predictor that matters in terms of the impact and success of coaching. So it's really about the strategic perspective of the program itself or the intervention, and then the commitment, the motivation on the part of the leader, and then the bond between the two.
Do you find, or have you had challenges with matching, with it not being a good match between the coachee and coach?
Sometimes that happens, right? So when you think about in sort of the digital world, what's great about that is, for an example, when a leader's onboarding in our platform, they're answering a variety of questions about themselves, and they're presented with potential coaches, 3 to 4 potential coaches. And they can read their bios, get a sense of who they are, see a video, get a sense of what their style is, and select who they think will be, a good match for them. At any point in that journey, if that leader is not feeling that they're getting what they really want out of that, or it's maybe not the best match, they have an opportunity to ask for a new match. And what's great about that is because we then have a whole network of coaches, there is that opportunity to maximize, the best fit for that person. So it's easier almost to intervene when there is a mismatch. What we're finding though is that 90% of the time, the matches that are happening within our platform are considered good matches. So it's a pretty high success rate.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Well, I think that upfront piece, being able to investigate a bit about who they are connecting with early on, and getting access to the video and to their background, and then them themselves going through the questionnaire or the pre-assessment. I think that's the piece that that kind of helps with the right matching. And moving on, we just have a little bit of time left today, and we talked a lot about coaching, a little bit about mentoring. From your point of view, what's the difference between the two, and especially at higher levels in the organization?
Mm-hmm. So there are pretty big differences between mentoring and coaching. Mentoring is the goal of having a mentor is really having somebody to provide proactive guidance, advice around the topic scenario that the individual is bringing to the table. Coaching is really a sort of, it's more of a listening and guiding experience. So a coach will, while if prompted and asked about their thought or opinion, a coach is not going to lead with advice on a particular topic, because it's much more about bringing out the potential and the thought process within the coachee.
Mm-hmm.
So those are sort of the fundamental differences between the two.
What we found, we've had our our events, our conferences for women in leadership for several years before the pandemic, and every executive or leader that had presented or shared their journey, they all recommended having at least a handful of mentors, anywhere from 5 to 7 at one period of time, for different reasons. You may be inspired by a mentor because of X, Y, and Z, or someone that similar background to you, someone that's maybe different than you, and so they have all found that mentors were very influential in helping them, shaping them, and inspiring them along the way. And you may, change your mentors over time depending on where you are in your journey. So, I think that's interesting. And the coach is kind of like your cheerleader, or your coach, if you think about, in a game, helping you get from, helping you attain your goals, right? So
Yeah.
it's really, you kind of can't have one without the other necessarily if you want to achieve your greatest performance or capabilities.
Absolutely, and both matter, right? Having mentors in your career are important. It's that opportunity to talk with someone about issues, problems, challenges, lean on their experience, get some guidance, like real guidance and advice on maybe what to do next and how to explore those things. And then the coaching is really somebody listening to you to help you identify and figure out within yourself, how do you now kind of figure out what to do next, and provide more of a reflective space without instructing or leading that person to the solution.
And Claude, I know you were going to chime in over there.
Well, just an example of the coaching and mentoring. I mentioned the example of the woman who was being, promoted several levels, and so they had a coach to really deal with performance issues, skills that she needed to acquire. But then she also had a mentor, I actually talked to the woman, and her big thing is she was having a real bout of imposter syndrome, feeling that she wasn't worthy, and why was this happening to her, and how was she going to navigate the politics inside and outside the organization, because this company worked a lot with government. And so the combination of being able to really get her hands around and think through the business issues that she needed to deal with was a nice balance to the emotional things that she was going through and making the change. And so I thought that's a pretty good example of the difference.
Beautiful example.
This is a great discussion. We could stay on for a lot longer. I'm just going to wrap up with one more question I have for you, Liz, and that's around kind of what are you seeing, for you, your organization going into next year or wrapping up for this year? What are some of your key priorities or considerations?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I'm excited about is I'm really excited to see, with my work with current customers, as well as talking with prospective clients, is the various ways that companies are starting to really think about how to apply coaching, given that it's more accessible now. And so, it's not, working with one customer, seeing their trajectory, we started out working with them on applying coaching to their existing leadership development program. So classic application to it. The next thing they wanted to do was really apply it to support internal mobility and horizontal career movement to lower level employees. That's brilliant. Not many companies are doing that. And then, other organizations are really thinking about, how do I really attach this to my diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging strategies? So not only how do I bring this intervention to maybe some underrepresented populations, but how are we helping to cultivate more perspective and inclusive leadership and allyship across a broader population of people? So I'm really excited about how now, with coaching being potentially more accessible to people, the various new applications that it can be added to when we think about holistic talent management and development, because there's so many great things that companies are having, and this could give them another lift in what they're trying to accomplish.
All exciting. And thank you so much for sharing what you have going on and your point of view and experience with coaching. And Claude, thank you as well for sharing some of our research at Brandon Hall Group. And everyone for listening in. I wish you all a very happy, healthy, productive, and great rest of the day and week ahead.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.